Hello and welcome to What's On at Cineworld Cinemas. I am Luke Owen. I'm joined by Laurie Blake, and here's what's going on at Cineworld this week.
We have an excellent adventure with Bill and Ted as the aging dudes face the music in this week's big release.
And we dive into the biggest bit of news from the MCU this week, which is a huge bit of casting that could have major ramifications on future Avengers movies. Party on, dudes. Bill and Ted Face the Music is in cinemas and available to watch now. You can book tickets for it in the link in the video description down below. And I mean, this might sound quite Alan Partridge here below, but can I just shock you? This film has basically been in development since 2008. Like that was when like the first sort of rumblings of this film were going to happen. And, you know, the Solomon and Matheson and Keanu Reeves and Alex Winter have basically been working on this film. The four of them have been working on this film for the past 12 years to finally get it up onto the big screen. And really, the reason why it's here is because John Wick was successful.
Oh, yeah. Keanu's resurgence. Here he is.
Exactly, yeah. Like, no studio was interested until John Wick was a hit. And they were like, oh, people like Keanu Reeves again. Maybe we will do that Bill and Ted 3. But you know what,
something so remarkably different from John Wick.
But like, as someone who is a huge fan of Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure and Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, watching this film on the big screen, like I had this huge grin on my face from start to end. I had a bit of a tear in my eye as the credits rolled. It was exactly what I wanted it to be. It was everything I wanted it to be, and in a way, slightly more. Like it was the movie It's weird. Like my wife said to me when I got back from the cinema last night, she goes, "What was the film like?" And I just said, "It was everything I wanted it to be."
Like it's like fan servicey, right?
No, in a way, sort of, yeah, but also no. Like it's a brilliant continuation of the previous two movies. Bill and Ted are now middle aged. You know, they're married. They've got grown up daughters, but they still haven't written the song that is going to save humanity that was told they were going. You know, they were told in the 80s, in the late 80s, by Rufus, you are going to write a song that is going to unite the world. And here they are now in their, you know, not so much their twilight years, but very much in their later years of life. They're not the California dudes they once were, though they still very much act like it. And they still haven't. Even after the events of Bogus Journey, where they wrote a song that did really well, it didn't unite the planet. And like the movie starts with sort of like basically a cataloging every album that they released after that, and all of the critics hating it, and like them sort of like going down and down and down. So when we find them, when we join them in the movie, they're back in the garage making, you know, trying to write this song, and they're just trying every instrument possible to write this song, and they don't know what it is. And that's when they get told by the replacement for Rufus, Kelly, played by Kristen Schaal, that it has to be done today, otherwise space and time and reality is going to fold in on itself. So you have to do it today.
You think some warning would have been good for them there? Like, you know,
you'd have thought, wouldn't you? I mean, they're in the future. Like, let us know, people. And so you end up getting three storylines running concurrently. You've got Bill and Ted going on their adventure, where they use the booth to try and steal the song from themselves. So they travel, you know, to future versions of themselves to steal the song that will unite the world. You've got their daughters going on their own adventure, where they're putting together a band that are filled with the greatest musicians in history that can help Bill and Ted write this song, or at least perform it with them. And you've got this really fun little C plot running through it of their wives, the princesses from the first movie, who are struggling in their marriage because Bill and Ted have never been apart from each other, and they've spent the last 20 years trying to write this song and failing to do so. You know, 30 years even, and failing to do so. So their marriage is now on this sort of rocky place. So the future selves, the future thems of the princesses travel back from the future to pick them up and take them through journeys time to show them what their marriage to Bill and Ted will be like at various different points in their future history. So you've got these three like interesting running concurrent storylines. And it is just, and at 90 minutes, this film rattles along. Like,
yeah, I was thinking it was like a breezy hour and a half from the looks of it. So You've had 12 years, guys. Quite more than 90 minutes. But yeah, I think it probably serves the purpose of the plot a lot better in that sense. Like, you don't want to outstay your welcome. You don't want to overdo it for that.
Mhm.
You can picture a world in which they go, oh, here's Bill and Ted's big return to the screen, and we've really overbaked this pudding. And instead, what they've done is crammed 3 plots into a brisk 90 minutes, which is pretty damn impressive.
Yeah, and it really really works for the movie, and I think that everyone is having a lot of fun doing it. You can kind of, Keanu Reeves and Alex Winter are clearly having a great time reprising these roles, and like you kind of mentioned the fan service thing. I think that it is certainly for the fans of the first two movies, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think you don't have to be like a diehard fan. There's not like overt references to the previous two movies saying like you won't understand this if you have not seen these movies. And while I was watching it, my overall takeaway from it was like, I'm so glad this isn't a reboot. Like,
Mm.
15 years ago, this would have just been a reboot. This would have just been two new actors playing Bill and Ted doing the same film they did in the 80s. But here it's because it's a continuation. And we've seen this with Halloween. We're going to see it with Ghostbusters next year. We've sort of kind of seen it sort of across the reboot landscape has changed. Star Wars even was, Force Awakens, for all intents and purposes, was a reboot, but a continuation at the same time. So I think it was smart to be the third movie in the trilogy as opposed to being a Bill and Ted reboot. And actually, because of that, I enjoyed the film so much more. And it was just nice to kind of like hang out with these characters again, even if it was for 90 minutes, and even if it wasn't, it wasn't a particularly long time to be with them. But I'm glad that we got it, and I really enjoyed my time with them.
I think that's the best thing you can do with these with the kind of modern reboot is pick up where you left off, but let time have passed for the characters too. Work out a way, it's a pretty ingenious way to bring these characters back to just be like, look, they haven't really changed as people fundamentally. Like, they've grown up, sure, but have they really grown up, and have they achieved everything they want to achieve? And then giving them that option to achieve it, because it makes the movie exist outside of the movie universe. It references the fact that this movie obviously struggled to be made many moons ago and took 12 years to even get to the screen now. And it kind of, I guess it creates something quite poetic for the viewer in that sense of, like, if you were a fan of the first two Bill and Ted movies, finally seeing this come to the big screen is kind of a big deal. And I guess quite a lot of people do go into these reboots with that little bit of trepidation, because we do know that, certain reboots and finishing off trilogies that should have been finished off a long time ago, like, have let us down in the past. So it's nice to see one that manages to give people what they want if they are Bill and Ted fans.
Absolutely, yeah. So, I mean, it's a bit of a hearty recommendation from me, but that may just be because I am coming at this very much as a fan of Bill and Ted, be excellent to each other, etc., etc. But if you are interested, you can book your tickets using the link in the video description down below. Right, well, now that Bill and Ted is out of the way, let's dive into the big bit of news this week. And this one came as a bit of a shock to me because Ant-Man 3 has got a bit of casting, according to Deadline, despite the fact that Ant-Man 3 has yet to be officially announced.
Yeah. Classic Marvel.
Yeah, it's poor old classic Ant-Man, really, isn't he? Like, my wife and I have been recently rewatching all the MCU movies, and it really does feel like this sort of the awkward stepchild of the group, because their movies always come after big Avengers stuff. Like, the first one comes after Avengers: Age of Ultron, and the second one comes after bloody Infinity War. Like, it really, like, it's hard to be like, hey, come watch this Ant-Man movie after you've watched Infinity War.
Oh yeah, it's the sorbet of the Marvel universe, isn't it? It's the palate cleanser from the emotional high points. But yeah, I think what's fascinating about Ant-Man is that, he has been flying under the radar, as a tiny little person you would imagine could do. But he actually, for some reason, makes the biggest impacts in the films that he's in. Like Civil War, and he's goes giant and starts smashing up the airport, and then obviously, like, he is the solution. Him turning up with the Pym particles is the solution to Endgame. Like, Ant-Man is incredibly important, and
yeah, what they set up in Ant-Man and the Wasp is pivotal to Endgame. Like, for a movie that not many people went to go and see, it is pivotal to like the plotline of Endgame.
Oh yeah, and like, you can only imagine it's going to be more pivotal going forward because of this bit of casting, because it's definitely to do with time travel.
It certainly is, yeah. So there's, according to Deadline, Jonathan Majors, who has been excellent in Lovecraft Country, a show I've been really, really enjoying, actually. According to Deadline, he has been tapped to play one of the MCU's, or one of the Marvel's biggest villains, and that is Kang the Conqueror. So according to Deadline sources, with so many new characters in the MCU, there could be a twist with how the character is featured in future films. But as of now, he is likely to be one of the main villains in the next installment in the Ant-Man franchise. So this is cool anyway, because I think Jonathan Majors is doing amazing work in Lovecraft Country, and I'm really looking forward to seeing him up on the big screen in a big budget movie. But this is a time traveling villain, as you said there, and we've just had a lot of messing with the timeline in Endgame. So perhaps this is, it seems like a very sensible way to introduce a character like Kang the Conqueror into the MCU timeline.
Yeah, and you've got to imagine, like, are they going to position him? Because Kang is obviously like, he messes with time travel, and that's kind of his thing. And that means that there are multiple versions of Kang also that have appeared in Marvel, and there are heroic versions of Kang who are younger or older than the current Kang the Conqueror Kang. So it's like, which one of them will it be? Will it be Immortus? Will it be? I think it's Iron Lad is the other one.
Iron Lad is the his younger version that he sort of like goes. Yeah, Kang is basically time travel to find his younger self and his older self, as well as alternate reality versions of himself to create like the Council of Kang,
like Cable, like Mr. Sinister. There's so many characters that have done this, and I think it'd be really interesting to see which Kang they pick and whether or not he's going to be the main antagonist of the Ant-Man franchise, because there's also that notion of messing with the time stream in Endgame to change the outcome of this war. And obviously, like they said, they can't really go back and change the past too completely, but they definitely have introduced a few rogue elements that clearly the Loki TV series is going to pick up on some point, with Loki being back. So I imagine, like in Ant-Man, like Kang could be either the head of something like the Time Variance Authority, coming in and sort of saying, like, you guys have messed with the time stream, I'm here to punish you for that. Or he could be after more ability to time travel, because now that Hank Pym is back, we have an unlimited number of Pym particles, and so the ability to mess with time is even greater. And he could it could be that he is really the main antagonist of Ant-Man here, or he could be in that sort of more Thanos role before Thanos became the big bad of all the Avengers, that sort of walk-on part that is so much more important than the stuff that preceded it. Like, you watch Guardians of the Galaxy and you're like, oh, Ronan the Accuser's got a big hammer. That's scary. And then you see Thanos and you're like, oh no, this guy's going to mess things up. So yeah, I think Kang is one of the greatest Avengers villains of all time, one of their biggest foes, and will be a fascinating inclusion to the MCU and really like take it off in that kind of new direction, because I think Endgame kind of skimmed over the literal invention of time travel. They were just like, cool, we can do that now, brilliant, let's use it to fix everything, and there was no repercussions, they just solved everything. So I think this is the time to sort of start layering those repercussions on, and better to start with Ant-Man and Hank Pym, who are sort of the creative minds behind time travel. I think it'd be really interesting to see if he's going to be like a leading character in this film, or whether it's going to be just a setup for the next Avengers.
That's what I'm kind of hoping as well, that you introduce him in Ant-Man 3, which my prediction is going to be called Ant-Man and the Wasp and Ant-Man and the Wasp. I think we're going to get Hank Pym and Janet Van Dyne as putting the Ant-Man and Wasp suits back on respectively. So like introducing him into that movie to then sort of, as you say, set him up for future Avengers movies, because like a character like Kang it feels like it's too big to just do in an Ant-Man film. Like, no disrespect to Ant-Man as a character in the franchise, because I love the Ant-Man movies, but like, yeah, it's Kang the Conqueror, man. Like, you've got so much in there, and you look at the character's origins. Like, his character origins has ties to Apocalypse, who is like a major X-Men villain. He is thought to be a descendant of Reed Richards of the Fantastic Four. So you've actually now got this character that has got ties to the new Marvel properties that the MCU has to play with in the Fantastic Four and the X-Men. So there's too much like untapped potential in Kang the Conqueror, and someone like Jonathan Majors to play this role, to just be like, and there's your villain, and now you're done. Like, no,
one and done.
Not to be exactly one and done. Never need to hear from you again.
Yeah, I think he's also there's so much with Kang that is unknown as well, and you can kind of slot him in wherever you want, because there's also the rumors that, because his name's Nathaniel Richards originally, wasn't he? And then he went back in time and became a pharaoh, and that's how he knows Apocalypse. And then he went forward in time and became Kang the Conqueror. But Nathaniel Richards is also the name of Reed Richards' dad. So there's also some speculation that it might be Reed Richards' dad in the future. It's really confusing. But I think it does mean for the movies that you can kind of just go, okay, well, we can make him whatever we want to be. And having all those sort of like comic book loose ends that you could tie up here and be like, we can introduce the X-Men through this, and we can introduce the Fantastic Four, all things that I'm sure Marvel are very keen to do and are working on, no doubt, in like a intelligent way. And I think this is a really smart way to bring him in, because you could do a series, you could do this whole next phase without any of those things and still have Kang in the background, and then just at the right moment bring those in, like, which I'm imagining will be at the big blow-off Avengers movie at the end of this cycle of films, and then we'll get like the first X-Men or Fantastic Four character bleeding into the universe, and then you'll just be like, that'll be like the final, the post-credit scene, I imagine, will be a Reed Richards, a Baxter Building or something like that,
Oh yeah. I mean, there's so much potential here for Kang. Like I'm sort of like fantasy booking stuff in my head now of like what I would do, or like a storyline that I would pitch. In that, Kang's kind of story is that in the 31st century, he's already conquered Earth, because Earth was kind of like a bit ramshackled. It was basically already destroyed, so it was very easy for him to conquer. So what if the Avengers messing with the time stream to defeat Thanos in 2019 has altered the future history, altered future's history? So Kang is now no longer a conqueror, and he hasn't conquered Earth, so he's now traveling back to fix the time stream.
Kang the busboy works at the hotel down the road.
I don't know, man. Like I think this is really, really huge bit of casting news. And as I say, like, I hope that this is treated with the right level of gravitas that I think the character deserves. And I really hope it's not a one and done thing. But that's all we've got time for on this edition of What's On at Cineworld Cinemas. Please do get in touch. Use the hashtag on Twitter, What's On at Cineworld. Send us your movie reviews. Let us know what you thought of Bill and Ted, Tenet, whatever you've seen at the cinema. I've been Luke Owen. This has been Laurie Blake, and that was Movies.